Alright guys, so let's continue on with creating more of the elements for our outfit. Let's go ahead and duplicate this leather pad that we have. Shift D to duplicate it. Let's go to our move it up. Let's set our origin to geometry so it's easier for us to move this around. Try to have this fit in on top of the leather pad that we already have. Okay, let's go to our sculpt mode, and we are going to, what we're going to do is we are going to be masking a part of the mesh for our leather pad here that we are going to use for the armor that's going to be on top of the leather pad. So remember, we're going to have an armor on top of this, and yeah, the armor is going to have this nice silhouette, and it's better for us to just work with what we already have here, extract out some mesh that we already have for the leather pad, and then sculpt it from there. Let's go ahead and make sure turn on front faces only, and stabilize stroke, turn on stabilize stroke, and set the factor to a higher value. So having the stabilized stroke is very important because when we mask, we kind of want to mask at a straight, accurate line as much as possible, because we are going to be creating a shape that look a little bit squarish. But of course, not just going to be squarish. We're going to add some designs on it, and this is the reason why we are using masking. That way we have more flexibility of the type of shape that we need, that we could create for our armor. And then also here. And also on this side. So remember, if you are masking, you just paint over the mesh and you're able to create this nice black mask. If you want to erase the mask, just hold Control as you paint to erase the mask. Okay, so now I have turned off the stabilized stroke. That way I could further clean it up with a little bit more control. So there are going to be times where you want to turn this on, the stabilized stroke, and then there's going to be times where you just want to turn it off. So you have a bit more flexibility of how you want to paint the mask. So what I like to do is around the parts where I just create like the nice straight line border, I start out with the stabilized stroke at first. And then as painting, to paint the rest of the mask, I just like to turn off the stabilized stroke. And then right here, I'm just creating a little spacing there. So erasing the mask that we have here, because what we're gonna have is we just need to have, what we really need is we just need the mesh for this part of the leather pad that we're gonna use as the armor. So remember, to erase the mask, just hold Control as you paint. That will allow you to get rid of the masking, and which is what I'm doing right now, holding Control as I paint out. Okay, I'm gonna erase this part also, and around here. Add a little bit more of the mask here, that way we could grab a little bit more of the mesh here later when we extract this mask. Alright, now let's go to mask. Let's go to sharpen mask to sharpen the edges of the mask. Let's go to mask again and mask extract. Turn off extract as solid and just press OK. There you go. And so now we have a little shape there that we have extracted that came from our leather pads. Let's go to edit mode. Onto the edit mode, we are just going to add thickness to this by extruding the faces. Press Alt E and extrude along the normals. And extrude that out. So just add the right thickness to your armor there. Probably could be a little bit thicker. There you go. Just a tad bit thicker. Because keep in mind that when we smooth this out, it's going to be a little thinner. So I always like to start out with something just a little bit thicker than what I need. Because in most cases, it's going to shrink down when we start to shape this out. Once we start sculpting. Let's go to our sculpt mode. And let's begin cleaning this up and shaping it the way we want it. I'm gonna go ahead and mask this area out of the mask of the armor. Going to soften the edges. Soften the edges here. Just painting the edges here with a paint mask to soften it. Okay, now back to sculpt mode. I'm gonna go to my move tool here as it's set to mask border. Move it a little bit to the right because I want to make it just a tad bit longer. And I'm just gonna move it up. There you go. Now is a good time to fix the basic shape of the armor before you start adding a bit more information on this. Try to get the basic forms down first. The size, how you want it. And then going to, you can see me, I like to use the lasso mask to first select the area that I want to mask. And then I go to the regular paint mask and then just soften the edges. So I'm doing this here, that way for this other side of the armor, I could also make it longer. Gonna go to the move and then mask border, pivot to mask border. And I'm just gonna go ahead and move it a little bit to the left so to make this thing just a tad bit longer. Make sure you are checking out every view of the armor, and you might want to hide the rest of your mesh if you need to. Sometimes you might want to isolate the mask, the armor itself. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and mask this part. Okay, go to my line project. And then here, we are going to make a clean cut. Okay, so with this here, using the line project, you could just click and drag onto the area that you want to trim for the armor, okay? And the shaded part, the darker part of the line project, that's the area that's the area of the mesh that's gonna get cut off, all right? So from this part, from that dotted line on down, any mesh with inside there will get trimmed. So the line project is a good tool to use if you want to just create like a nice clean hard surface. And this is what I'm doing right now. This is the reason why I have just kind of extended this out a bit, because I just want to go to my line project and trim a little portion of it to get a nice clean hard edge. Like right here. So yeah, just gonna go ahead and make a little trim here. It's easier to just use the line project when we're doing this. That way we could get a nice clean hard edge. There's other ways to do this. You could use the scrape brush to just scrape the edges, but I think that will take more time on this particular mesh. Really depends on what you want to do, but for something that's that you want, that's going to be just, you want the surface at the side to be just completely flat, and it's just a very simple shape, you could use the line project. But for anything that's a little bit more complex, it's best to use the scrape brush. Okay, so this right here, and you could see me using the line project. I am able to move the overall projection of the line by holding the space bar and then click, hold, and drag. And then you could relocate the line project tool wherever you want. So you could just like click and drag and then hold the space bar and drag it to reposition the line project. Okay, so right here, there you go. Up. I could try to make it better. Maybe right here. Trying to get a nice clean trim here. There you go. So you can see we got a nice clean hard surface just by using that line project. And we're gonna do the same thing for all the messy parts. You can see that this is messy. So we are going to be using that same tool to fix that right there. There you go. And we have to do the other parts that has a really rough edges. Okay, I think I could do a little better at the part right there. I'm gonna redo the trim. So you don't have to just stick to the very first trim that you did. You could redo it all over again to get the trim that you want. Okay, back onto the sculpt mode. Trying to find a good view here where we could make a nice little trim. So I'm gonna masking this part out. That way we could go ahead and make sure that that part is not gonna be affected when we trim. So remember, you could relocate that trim project, that line project, by holding the space bar as you click and drag. I'm gonna try again for this. All right, trying to get as accurate as I can with this. Yes, you can see that I am masking a particular part of the armor. So if there are any parts that you don't want to trim, then just use your lasso tool or your paint mask tool to paint that specific area that you don't want to be affected by the line project. All right, because now I just want to trim this area out and I don't want to accidentally touch this area. Okay, back onto the line project here. So depending on the area that you want to trim on the armor, you might want to click and drag from left to right or from right to left. So definitely mess around with that line project tool. And when you're using the line project tool, it's good to mess around with the type of view that you have. If one view doesn't work, just change up the view a little bit to get the right trim that you need. Yeah, one particular view that you're looking at might not work. So just gonna make the right adjustment, rotate a little bit your viewport. Okay, so there you go. I'm gonna adjust the voxel size here to a higher value and then remesh that. Alright, so we got a little bit lower poly now. Reduce the amount of polygons here so it's a little bit more pixelated. That way we could smooth this out a little bit. The edges. So like this right here, I could inflate this a little bit here because it got a little too thin now. And also right here, I could inflate it using the inflate brush. And smooth it. Smooth it out. Smooth out the edges. There you go, smooth out the edges there. So you could also see that we get like a little nice bevel going. But you don't want the poly count to be too low, otherwise it'll just melt down. So find that sweet spot on your voxel size where you're still able to retain the shape that you have made here for your armor. Smoothing that out. Oh, and maybe this area could also smooth this out. Just very subtle smoothing. If you see that the mesh is melting too much, just go ahead and bring down the intensity of your smoothing brush. And then here at the bottom, and onto the circular part again. If we have this at a really high resolution right now, it's going to be difficult for us to smooth those parts right there where we have the circular part. And then using the grab brush, you just kind of widen that circular area. And then I could go ahead and kind of lift this up, and also here, lift this one up a little bit using my grab brush. So you could see we got nice little shape here. So it's not just completely straight, because I think having something that looked too straight wouldn't look as interesting. All right, I think it's time for us to create the letter, more of a design here for our armor. But before we do that, I want to go ahead and maybe fix a little bit the length of the armor. I think let's see here. I want to go to my sculpt mode, smooth out the edges, smooth out the masking here. Okay, using my grab brush, I want to extend this out a bit. Extend it out a little bit. I'm going to mask this and then extend this one out also, so it's a little bit longer. So just make sure you have nice soft edges for your mask. If you want to have a nice transition from the surface that you have masked onto the faces that you want to manipulate. So yeah, I'm using the grab brush here to just kind of round out this shape, because I just don't want it to be way too straight. But at the same time, you don't want it to be way too round either, where it's gonna start to look stylized, all right? So just do just enough subtle roundness without going too far where it starts to look cartoonish. There you go. Yeah, so you got this nice little shape now for our armor from that view. Pull this out a tad bit. And pull this out. Okay, there's just some subtle changes here. And then scrape this up a bit to retain some of the hard surface. Yeah, I think the shape is coming along for the armor there. Okay, now on to sculpt mode. And nudge this a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and turn on my front faces only and stabilize stroke turn on. And then let's go ahead for the factor. Let's go ahead and crank that up. Let's go ahead and create. So what we're going to do is we're going to create kind of like a letter M shape here that we are going to be extracting later on. So I'm just going to mask this area out. And yeah, it's very important to have front faces turned on, stabilize stroke turn on, So you have to have this front face turned on so that you're not going to be masking the areas at the bottom of the surface of this armor. So we only want to mask what we see here visible in our eye at the top, all right, without affecting the bottom part of the armor. And we want to have stabilized stroke on so that we got nice straight stroke as we are creating the masking for our shape here. There you go. And then another one on this side. So your first try might not be good, so don't be afraid to undo and redo it again. Especially if this is your first time using this kind of tool or creating something like this, just take your time on this. And then right here and on down, it's gonna come down all the way to the side here. Okay, let's go ahead and sharpen the mask. Alright, good. Let's go to mask, mask extract. Make sure you turn off extract as solid and press OK. And so we have a little piece here that we could work with. Just hit the tab key so you're on edit mode. I could probably, yeah, select all the faces, extrude faces along normals, extrude that out. So we get a little thickness going. Okay, I'm gonna go to my voxel size and adjust that to 0.003 for a lower value so we have more resolution to work with. Because right now we need to use our line project. It's important that when you are using the line project that you have quite a good enough resolution. You need to have enough polygons to work with in order for you to be able to use the line project effectively. If your mesh is way too low poly, it's gonna be hard for you to create the trim that you need on the surface. So yeah, just make sure that you mess around with the voxel size there. Okay, so we're gonna be using the line project here to just trim the area for the edges here. So we got a nice little cleaner edge for our letter M here. Letter M shape. And onto this side. Just trim this here. Try again. Get a nice cleaner trim. Adjust the view as needed. I'm gonna go ahead and mask this part of the shape here. There you go. All right, now I want to go ahead and trim this area out for the shape that we have. So I want to create a nice edge there, and I want to make sure that the areas here are not going to be affected. And so that's the reason why I have masked this part out and then just kind of left this open to be trimmed. Okay, back onto the line project and gonna go and trim that area out. Nice little trim. There you go. Now I'm gonna go do the other inner part of the M shape here, and I'm gonna go ahead and trim this right here. And then onto the upper left top part, and I'm gonna trim this area out. There you go. Could do a little better. Let's see. Okay. I'm gonna go and mask this. And then do this here. And I'm just gonna go use my grab brush to just gonna pull this down. You might need to remesh this after you trim it, especially if you're gonna go back and use the grab brush and the smoothing brush and all the other brushes here. Get into the habit of remeshing it. Okay, now this part right here needs to be trimmed, so we got a nice straight edge right here. There you go. And then remesh that, Control R to remesh, and go back to your grab brush and then just adjust the shape as needed. So you might want to play around with the value of your clip start. If you try to zoom into your mesh and you see it's getting cut off the mesh, definitely adjust your clip start there. So now I'm just using my clay strip brush to just kind of push this in. So I'm trying to get a nice shape here. So I just want to kind of get rid of this area. Yeah, this part right here, just gotta have to manually sculpt this. That's no problem. Then onto the scrape brush, you just gotta scrape it so that we got a little bit more of a hard edge there. And same with this area. So those parts there that didn't come out as good, you just have to go to those parts and manually fix it yourself. I'm gonna smooth this out. Using the scrape brush, you just gonna flatten this area out. This is just a rough sketch here. Later on, when it's time for us to retopologize this, we're gonna have a much cleaner mesh. But by sculpting at the beginning, we can have more flexibility of the type of shape that we want.